Who kicks that off? It is. Great. All right, it is 9 o'clock. We'll give everyone just a moment to get joined here. Thank you all so much for joining us today. All right. Well, I think we will get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Lindsay Valdez, VP of Audience Strategy and Inventory Quality at Freestar, where we provide premium ad monetization for enterprise publishers. I'm joined here today by Josh Stone, VP of BD and Partnerships at Tollbit. Tollbit, for anyone who is unfamiliar, is the leading platform that allows publishers to monitor, manage, and monetize the AI usage of their content. The topic of today's webinar and session is, you guessed it, bots. AI bots are not just scraping your content, they are quickly becoming one of your fastest growing audiences. At Freestar, this has been a hot topic with publishers, which is why we're coming to the table today to address it head on. Nearly half of web traffic today is driven by bots. Yet most publishers still lack the clear understanding of who they are, what they're doing, and how they impact the business. This is all a relatively new topic, I would say, at least at this scale. For me, working with publishers at Freestar on traffic-related things, 2 years ago, we certainly weren't talking about bots. And, in the last 6 months, the scale of this issue is something we can no longer ignore. A few quick housekeeping items before I hand it over to Josh. We're aiming for 30 to 35 minutes of content, covering the most common and hottest issues of this topic, with time at the end for Q&A. This is only useful to us if it's useful to you. If you do have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments throughout, right on the side of your screen there into the chat. And we will either address them directly at the end, time allowing, or follow up afterwards. This is also being recorded, so you will get it in an email afterwards, and you can pass that on to fellow teammates within your organizations that may also find this relevant. All right, with all of that said, Josh, let's get started.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and Lindsay, thank you for having us on for this webinar. We're thrilled to be partnering with Freestar. Tollbit, as a bit of background, was founded on the fundamental premise that the underlying economics of the open web, as we have known it for 25 to 30 years, are beginning to fall apart. If you look back at the history of the internet, to wildly oversimplify, the internet was predicated on people go to websites, and those people buy something, subscribe, or see an advertisement. That's basically the entire economy of the internet in a nutshell. And if people no longer go to websites, but bots and agents go to websites on people's behalf, that economic exchange begins to fall apart, and particularly the third one. And so what we need, and what Tollbit was founded to do, is to provide a fundamental new infrastructure layer to power a fair exchange of value in this bot first or agent first world. We say that we help publishers monitor, manage, and monetize. Just to sort of explain that in more practical terms with the product today, it means that we provide an analytics tool so you can get better visibility. We provide what we call our agent site, which gives you more control over that bot traffic. And then Monetize, we have monetization infrastructure that allows you to charge for access and usage of that content in a scalable way. So yeah, very excited to be here. That's a bit of background on Tollbit.
Great. Thank you for that. And I really loved what you said the other day in prep for this call of really treating these bots as another type of audience. It's actually another area where publishers need to think how they handle. What's the strategy for your organic search? What's the strategy for this traffic? What is the strategy for your content with AI bots? All right, so we have four main sections that we're trying to get through today, a little bit just based on the common questions that we here at Freestar for our publishers. Wanted to get that into one main session. The first thing I wanted to get into here is a little bit about bot visibility. Most publishers, again, this is relatively new for many of them in their organizations. Many of them don't actually know which bots are hitting their site or what they're doing, which makes it very hard to even know where to decide where to start, where to decide what to block. Uh, the most common area, and I've been asked this countless times, the most like first place they're looking for with traffic metrics is GA, Google Analytics. Josh, is bot traffic even something that they can see in Google Analytics?
Yeah. So the short answer is no. Some of it may show up there, but on the whole, for the most part, most of these bots and agents don't render JavaScript. And so they don't actually show up in traditional analytics tools like a Google Analytics. A lot of this data is going to be available in server logs. And, most people aren't necessarily diving through, billions of logs every single day. We've decided to make that our hobby. And so that's what we do. We package up that data. It's going to live in your server logs, but you're also going to have to figure out how these bots are identifying themselves, what are the latest user agents, and that's the effort that we take on in our analytics product. And you hit the nail on the head, which is getting visibility into this problem is the most important first step, right? And we spend a lot of time with customers who haven't necessarily decided their strategy around this yet. They haven't decided if they want to block everything. They haven't decided if they want to monetize, but they don't actually, they can't make that decision without the data and insights to understand the problem. And that's what our analytics product is designed to do, is to give you free tools to better understand what's happening so that you can then begin to make more of these decisions downstream.
Yeah, that is so important. It just is almost, and especially for like somebody, ideally this is something that held by someone technical, but for me, when you say server logs, I'm just like, no, like find me something else, find a different way for me to kind of understand higher level what's happening with everything hitting our site. All right, so because it's all new, one response I'm getting is overwhelming. Because of this and the things we've talked about leading up to this, it's kind of turned this narrative into this good bot versus bad bot situation. Because as we know, certain bots do certain things and some of it's tied and overlap to traffic. So Josh, can you talk to us about the different types of bots and what they're actually doing with the content when they get it? And yes, this general idea of the good ones versus the bad ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, there are a lot of bots, right? And bots have been around for a long time. And there is a huge bucket of bots that have nothing to do with AI and LLMs as we're talking about it. So I'll sort of leave that piece on the side. In the context of AI bots or AI agents, there's a couple of core categories to understand. And this is a bit of a broad simplification, and there's more complexity under the hood. But there's really two fundamental activities that LLMs are doing. One is training, which is essentially teaching the foundational model to think and speak. And training means really pulling in as much of the internet as you can get your hands on, and then using that to, train this foundational model. The second piece is what's called RAG, or grounding, or often called inference. I wish they would pick one name for it rather than having a bunch, but all of these terms have some nuances to them, but generally mean the same thing, which is The model, once it's been trained and educated, if you will, gets asked a question that it might want to validate some more information around. It goes out onto the internet just like you or I would, and it does research, right? If you asked me, what's happening in the news, or you asked me, about our political system, or any question, if I want to give you a good answer, I'm going to go do some research and then take some notes and then bring you back a more educated answer. That second piece is RAG, and that's where we are mostly focused from a monetization standpoint. We think that it is one, a more sustainable opportunity. Once a model is trained, it's pretty much done for the most part. Whereas retrieval or RAG is an ongoing need, right? Every time I get a new question, I need to go do more research. It also has a larger potential customer base because there's really only a small handful of foundational model companies that are building these massive LLMs. But developers who are building on top of those still need to go out and do the RAG or the retrieval part. So it's a more sustainable activity and it's a broader customer base. And we're seeing now across our network that RAG scraping per page is growing 10 times faster than scraping volume for training. So it overtook overall training volume in our network at the beginning of last year and is now significantly larger as a share of total scraping activity. All of that said, I don't think it's as simple as good versus bad, right? And you said this up front, which is we have to think of bots themselves or agents, maybe, whatever you want to call them, as a new audience, right? And not necessarily think, oh, it's good or it's bad, but think this is a new audience. How do I serve this audience? And how do I get value from that audience? And the old way of thinking is, oh, bot scrapes me, then sends me people back, right? That's the Google exchange of value. You scrape my content, you send me people. We see in the data that these services don't send people. We had a specific publisher on the platform who gets scraped around 10 million times a month by OpenAI, and ChatGPT sends them 800 visitors back. So the referral exchange of value is not there. So how do you monetize that audience or find a way to get an exchange of value with this new, bot-based audience? And that might be blocked, that might be monetized, it might be licensed, but you have to approach each in its own way, just like you would with how you optimize your own human audience.
I come from an SEO background where I keep thinking in my mind, like, I hope they find a traffic model. I hope they find a traffic model. And it's taken like on LinkedIn, on the industry blogs for SEO or GEO, AEO, whatever they want to call it these days, that's using these to strategy to rank in these systems. I can say of all the publishers, hundreds of publishers, traffic I've looked at in the last year, I've seen ChatGPT 0 times, like none in the top 10. Sorry, top 10, I'll specify. Like anywhere near the top, there's not a whole lot of traffic happening there. So we get a lot of this strategy discussion around standing up for the publisher and their content, block it all. I'm starting to see these extensive robots files and these ideas and strategies that like, okay, add this to the list and then they won't get our content without paying and we're going to keep everything. And then you have this other side of it that's like, I promise you they're going to find the content somehow, what you're doing. And then what's the risk of that? Have you now excluded your brand from coming up? And so I know it's a conversation I personally tread lightly with publishers because I've seen just this swing of very strong POVs around it. It's either very much like they don't want it or they're open to like kind of either way. It all needs a strategy. And this is very interesting to understand. This is the problems around, especially the ones that are, millions of times a day or a month or whatever you said, is a problem on many different levels. Leads through different systems of potentially ad monetization or just skewing data and costs for the site. Okay. That was great. Let's jump now into strategies for actually managing. So you've explained to us now a little bit about the different parts, what you'll be seeing in a system like Tollbit. Now for strategy around managing the bot traffic and the time sensitiveness around this. Beyond the licensing conversation, which we will get to, definitely saving the hottest conversation for the end. Beyond that, what are some of the reasons where publishers need to like act right now? Like it's happening, they're still understanding what it's hurting and what it's doing to their business, but what are some reasons they need to act right now to get this under control?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, as I said earlier, I think step one is get visibility, right? This is happening, and I think everyone understands that it's happening. But one thing we experience is I think publishers tend to us underestimate just how much it's happening. Just to understand the frequency, the volume, the patterns across different areas of your content. So getting visibility on it is really important. There's two, I would say, sort of macro impacts, right? One is, um, there's the obvious if AI chatbots are answering the question that I would have come to your website to get an answer to in a prior world, that's lost out. That's missing ad revenue, right? So there's a very real economic impact that bots don't render ads, right? Agents don't render ads, or ideally they're not. And so you are servicing this new audience for free. And against that, you're also bearing the cost of hosting that visitor, right? And so in some ways, it's like running a retail store, and someone comes in and steals a bunch of clothes off the rack, and then you pay for their valet parking on the way out. It's it's not a great exchange. So it's important to get control of this. And to your earlier question on is it block, 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 or is it allow? I think you have to ask the question for each of these agents or each of these bots. You may want to block or you may want to allow, but the question is why, right? And if you look at the mental model we use for human audiences, you might run your website completely free and open because you've done the math that says, I'm going to get more audience by being free, and that's going to allow me to monetize via advertising at a better effective rate than if I were to charge. Or you might do the opposite math and say, I have really premium niche content that's valuable to a specific audience, and I'm going to charge a subscription, and I'm not going to let you access it unless you pay me, right? And you may, depending on who you are as a publisher, and depending on who that audience is, you may make a different decision in those different instances. But the important thing is get visibility, get control, so that you can actually make those decisions rather than sitting back and letting it all happen and paying for their parking at the same time.
Yeah, that is so important to understand. In this, what I'm calling like next era or future publishers, the world of tomorrow's publishers, it's not going the idea that they're going to be able to just publish content with no unique value and just our content alone on no unique value. It's already, we saw this coming from like a Google SEO and organic search perspective, started huge algorithm updates to just weed out sort of spam content. And this aligns with that entire talk track as well, is that publishers need to have a value prop in all areas that is not easily replicable by the AI systems altogether, right? We have to have that thing on your site. And if you do have really premium content, which believe the premium journalism, premium articles, some such great brands of publishers doing this today, this what we're talking about, this is going to give you that leg up and leverage you need to actually work in the monetization model, because it's not going to be just like average content, but it's also going to help with things like subscription models. And we're moving into this world of audience fragmentation. And I spent 10 to 15 years talking about just, Google SEO and organic search, and Facebook, the big 4 or 5 sources. And now we're starting to see that bleed much deeper into 10 traffic sources, 15 traffic sources. It's going to be audience, but in all these different places. So as you're working to value prop, as Josh said here, value prop when it comes to your content, it comes to your brand, it's going to play huge in the willingness and interest anyone is going to want to pay you for some of these models. Okay, so I don't know if did you touch on everything here about robots.txt? Was that useless? Do people do it? Apologies if you already said that, but I feel like that's really big right now. Like publishers are like, what do I put in my robots file?
Yeah.
What is that?
So, I mean, look, robots.txt, is worthwhile to set out and set the rules that you want there. However, robots.txt is a passive honor system based mechanism. There is no legal enforcement around it. There is no technical enforcement around it. So it's, to go back to my now probably overused retail store comparison or metaphor. It's like putting a sign out in front of the retail store that says, please don't steal our merchandise, but your doors are wide open and you have no security guard and you have, nobody at the cash register. Maybe most people will listen, but a lot of people won't. And we see across the network that the vast majority of AI companies are not listening to robots.txt. They are going ahead and scraping the content anyways. They used to be a little bit more cagey about that. Now they're actually just being more upfront about it, and they are actually updating their terms of service to make explicit that if a user is asking for something, they're going to ignore your robots.txt file because the user is asking for it. So it's not to say don't update your robots.txt file. It still has impact, but you have to be clear-eyed about what it can actually do, and that it is a completely passive system. Beyond that, there's cybersecurity measures. Cybersecurity tooling is out there. We have close partnerships with a number of the leading providers, and it can certainly be effective, albeit in most cases somewhat expensive, right? So it's not a solution that all publishers can necessarily roll out. If you can do it, we think it's important, and it's certainly helpful, and it's going to allow you to get more control. Our view on this in general is we have to think about both the carrot and the stick. So if the stick is blocking and cybersecurity, we need to do that. We need to make unauthorized access to your content more difficult. It might not become impossible. It's a game of whack-a-mole, right? Folks who are trying to evade cybersecurity get better every day. Cybersecurity gets better every day, and it just kind of goes back and forth ad infinitum. We still have to do that, right? We have to make that unauthorized path more difficult and raise the associated costs with that. But on the other side, we also have to make the authorized path better and faster and easier, right? So it can't just be stick. We have to also give the carrot. And that's really where Tollbit focuses with our agent site product, is helping publishers not only think about how do I block and prevent access, but now actually think about, okay, how do I package up and market content to this new audience, right? Again, if we think about bots as a new audience, you have to start thinking proactively about how do I serve that audience, right? And how do I make my site actually better for an agent if they pay me, right? And once that economic seesaw flips, that's when a market will really develop. And so you have to think about both sides of the equation.
I love that. It's so crazy to think of it in that way. Like, what do you actually want to do with them when they get there? Like every other audience, there's a strategy behind it. You don't want to overturn them away if there's some useful ones, and you want to work that relationship the same way you work other relationships. Um, Okay, I do love that there's some questions and things coming in at the end. I'm going to go through this last section, and this is all, we're all friends here. We can, Josh, feel free to casually read through some of what is the discussion happening in the chat, and I will also get to those momentarily. All right, so let's pivot real fast to the future of marketplaces and publisher AI relationships. This can kind of go into that idea of what kind of deals or maybe leverage they have, what they want to do in terms of licensing. We can talk about that here too. But where do you see the publisher AI relationship heading? And whether it's content like the marketplaces of the world, there's always another marketplace model. And there is one here as well. So is that the answer, or publishers should be more looking for direct deals? And I'm just going to throw it out honestly that this part to me is the one that's coming, still to come. Like, we have all these publishers who want all this revenue right now, and we have to think back to all the other eras of like when things first started, and it's similar. A lot of talk, a lot of belief, authentic, real belief that there's a publisher monetization model for their content. There's some legislation happening, there's some lawsuits happening, so it's not fully fleshed out yet. We're all kind of still waiting, but where are you projecting that is going to land at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, I am. I always hesitate to make projections or predictions in a world that is changing as rapidly as this one is. So I don't necessarily plant any flags. But that said, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record in saying, it depends, but I think it does depend, right? I think it depends on the type of publisher that you are. It depends on the types of agents that you're trying to do business with. And I think there will be a mix, right? Just like we monetize people on the internet in a bunch of different ways, I think we will monetize agents and bots on the internet in a bunch of different ways. And I think publishers who can go and get direct one-on-one enterprise deals for millions and millions of dollars should do that, as long as those deals are structured in the right way and thoughtful around IP. Good money if you can get it. You shouldn't count on it necessarily being recurring. But that also doesn't mean there isn't a more scalable, programmatic piece of that puzzle as well, right? And if you look at the ad market, a lot of publishers, have thriving direct businesses and thriving programmatic businesses that live together. And so you could imagine a similar world in the licensing space. But content licensing also might not be the only monetization lever, right? There might be other ways to monetize this exchange. And I think, again, what we have to start thinking about, the real problem is really sort of scalability. Right now, everything is a manual partnership, right? It's a long process with lawyers and partnerships, people like me involved, and tech companies don't want that. And so we need a more scalable model, number one. But on the publisher side, we also, again, we have to start thinking about, if this is a net new customer, how do I market to and package for that customer? There's this idea that, AI companies don't want to pay for content. They are already paying for content. They are just not paying you. They are paying third-party scrapers who go out and pull in content from all across the internet. And they're paying them for access to your content. We have a tool within the Tollbit dashboard that allows you to test across 20 or 30 of these third-party scrapers what they're able to get access to from your website. Most of them are able to access content, even if there is a paywall or cybersecurity in place. But what's important is if you look at these companies' websites, they don't talk about content or the brands they have access to. They talk about things like latency. They talk about things like data structure. They talk about response time. And so that's how they market to this audience, we have to start thinking similarly, right? And think about, okay, if we're trying to serve the agent audience, if we're trying to serve the bot audience, how do we make it faster, easier, better to access my content from me directly rather than paying some third party scraper, right? And so I think that's the big leap we have to make here, is that, this is a new audience. We have to figure out how to get value from that audience, but if we want value from that audience, we also have to figure out how to better serve that audience. And that's sort of a new framing, I think, for the industry to start thinking about, is, how do we better package? How do we better market? The same way we think about it for people, we have to start thinking about it for agents.
At Freestar, we've had many internal conversations of how to serve our publishers in this way. And one, you mentioned scale. One is the scale that Freestar offers. So when we can, and this fits the entire narrative of the quality and the offering, something unique. So when you can get that scale and go out, we have executives here that do these relationships and partnerships with the big leaders in the industry, and that is one of our sort of hooks. Is just that we're hoping, as it evolves, to not only have some of the biggest and best brands of publishers and the content that they're offering and the services they're offering, but then bring them together in sort of a package scale that publishers are really struggling one-on-one. Even really big publishers get there and they're not really big. Like, you almost have to like join forces with some of them in your certain niche or vertical or whatever offering that you have, and then think of the strategy and the best path to serve them. I love that. All right, so we've covered so many things here today. As we wrap it up, and as you get into this last point, I'm going to kind of go through some of these questions. I think many have been answered. Tollbit, for one, is that UI, as we just came up in several of these, is that source and UI for you to view the visibility from the bots. Like, that's number one thing, right? And you can expand that here, but they're going to go to something like that service where they see which bots, and then you can kind of start to get that number one like foundation of understanding around it. What are 2 to 3 sentences, your overall point of view on kind of blocking the big ones, LLMs? This is a common question, like Gemini, Claude. What happens when you block them? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I would say, to at the risk of sounding a little bit repetitive, step one, if you haven't already, visibility on, right? Get data, understand what is ChatGPT pulling in, what are they reading, are they listening to your robots.txt file, are they sending you referrals? The answer to both of those two is probably no, but look at the data and confirm. So step one is get visibility and understand the problem, and then you can begin to make these individual decisions for yourself. It would be hard to get through any publisher webinar without mentioning Google, obviously. Google does pose a major challenge. Google right now uses the same bot to build their search index for traditional Google search that they use to power AI overviews and some of their AI products. This is a huge problem for publishers because you obviously don't want to lose your position in Google search if that's a big portion of your traffic, as it obviously is for many publishers. So you're stuck a little bit between a rock and a hard place with Google. And that's the unfortunate reality. We hope that they will continue to, they've announced some plans to try and break out more bots. They've moved slowly on that. We hope they will continue down that road. We think it's the right thing. If you look at an OpenAI, they're actually very well behaved on this front. They have a training bot, they have an indexing bot, and they have a RAG bot. And so they break out their bots across very specific purposes. So you can make decisions not only on ChatGPT specifically, but on, I'm fine with retrieval, but I don't want training, or I'm fine with training, I don't want retrieval, right? So you can actually make more granular decisions with those providers. And I think blocking or not blocking, whether it's a big developer or a little developer, I think again comes back to that question of exchange of value, right? If I'm going to give away my content for free, what am I getting out of it, right? And if you have a specific objective that you feel you're going to achieve by having your content pulled into OpenAI's models or pulled into Claude, um, then don't block, right? If you don't have an objective, you don't see a value exchange there, then block and work on finding that exchange of value that is going to justify that. And part of that, as I said, is figuring out how to um, better package and market the content itself, the data itself, in a way that maybe these bots are willing to pay for in the future. So step one, get visibility so that you can actually make this decision. Don't listen to me, listen to your own data. Step two, get the control, right? Be able to block, be able to optimize your site for this new audience. And then step three is figure out how you want to monetize this new class of visitor.
We love the phrase human in the loop around here, and this is just kind of reaffirming that as much as we would love to give some system the control and you figure out the bots and you figure out why and what to do with them, and maybe we'll get there, and certainly those kind of tools can help. AI can help solve the problem of AI. That's funny, but you still need that human. This seems like we need to understand it as audience experts and as publishers on the monetization scale, and it's still going to actually take people and time. And that's like, there's new roles evolving for what takes away, AI gives, right? There's these roles that need to kind of better understand that. Okay. Jumping to the questions, there's a few good ones, and I'm just going to candidly read down some of them on the spot. Are there emerging solutions to monetize access to agents? This may have been already covered. I think there are, but yes, and I think there are goals and areas in which it's expected to happen. Wouldn't you agree? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of emerging solutions, I'm hoping we're moving beyond the label of emerging to maybe even established soon. But the first one I would say is obviously Tollbit, and of course I'm biased, but our monetization tools allow you to very efficiently monetize agent access to your content. So you can go in, you can establish the terms under which a developer or an agent can access and use your content, set the rates against that access and their usage-based rates. And then on the developer side, it's a very scalable solution. They can come in, review the terms, review the rates. Once they've accepted those, then we handle authentication and billing and all of that in the interim, and validate that they are actually a paying customer, pass through the content, and you can go from there. So we can get from long extended licensing agreement negotiations to hopefully a few clicks on either side to get to a more scalable solution.
Yeah, and just what they would want to see. Are they here for literally one article? Like they're going to get smarter and better too on what they're trying to find, other than just hopefully like hitting the same sites and pages extensively. All right, thank you. The next one. If a user doesn't get access on GA, which I knew, but thank you so much. I thought I knew. Sometimes there's spikes and you just don't know if the GA traffic kind of covers it. Thank you for that. How can we understand our visibility? That's that's something like a Tollbit in which you're looking at the visibility around which bots are hitting the site. On our side, we're working with them, and the model is free to publishers to kind of understand its various base level. There's other programs and plans and premium plans that they offer, but through we're trying to go down that path with just seeing it. And if it's not like SEO, how can we increase our presence? I think it almost kind of still is like SEO. Like you can go to LinkedIn and have a fun time, like on the debate of is AEO different? And fundamentally, I've been doing this for a long time, and a lot of the same principles apply. Like these bots, they may access information differently, but the idea that they can interact with you and understand your brand, this is kind of like a newer conversation around brand authority and other offline things that you're doing to help the bots get who you are. There's some best practices around there. They're calling these areas AEO for answer engine optimization and GEO generative. They're very similar, but like the AI mode and the LLMs. Play around with it. I've told my teams for, spend an hour and just see what they say about all of our publishers, and like dummy it in the sense are like, who is the best source for this, and see how they're accessing your content. Some of it you can tell is just like about pages are open and they gather they'll gather from the web, from reviews, a lot of offline areas that people can assess brands. So that's how kind of like I kind of still go back to the SEO. That's like basics. Keep down that path. Like we may call it something different, but good quality user experience, unique content, unique offering, all of those are going to help your presence in all these areas. Okay, the next one is really good. They're sitting behind Cloudflare. We use Cloudflare broadly to deny or give access. A Tollbit implementation would be to disable these Cloudflare features. So I want to clarify that. I don't think that's true, and rely solely on Tollbit instead.
So no, so we integrate with Cloudflare or whatever CDN you might be using. Tollbit's goal is to really be sort of tech stack agnostic. So we integrate at the CDN level. So whether you're using Fastly or Cloudflare or Amazon CloudFront, we can seamlessly set up. We sit, effectively adjacent to that service. So it's an and, not an or. And if you have other cybersecurity tools, we have partnerships with them to help facilitate the platform as well. So our goal really is, no matter how you may be set up on the back end, you can implement Tollbit monitoring, control, and
Okay. Thank you. The next one, I believe you spoke to some. You can see it there yourself too, Greg. He's talking about the different bots in Google and Gemini and the crossover there. So there's ways to kind of customize or modify. You can add to this. But the last part of that question is particularly interesting. Can you see any of that data from the Google bot types, or even any? There's probably the same for Bing. There's probably the same for other search engines. Is that easy to differentiate, or not? We're not there yet as an industry.
So I guess it depends what you mean. So I guess one important clarification I did not make. We partner with cybersecurity companies. We are not a cybersecurity company. So we work with or identify bots that are identifying themselves. Google bot, GPT search bot, etc. We spend a lot of time talking to developers, researching, understanding what the companies are using these identified bots for. And we have a bot index that helps our customers understand that landscape. But what we are not doing is what cybersecurity companies do really effectively, which is identify unidentified bots, right? So they look at all sorts of inputs and run those through all sorts of different predictive models to understand bots that are rotating IP addresses and using Chrome headers, but are actually bots, making that determination of if it's a person or if it's a bot. That's a service we're not in. We partner with those providers to do that. So to recap, we spend a lot of time trying to understand what the identified bots are actually used for. Most of that's like a research and building out this index for you. We don't do the sort of advanced detection and identification that a cybersecurity provider would.
And then same person with a new question: value exchange for marketplaces. So for a publisher, the likely customer here, powered by Tollbit, the major customer for the marketplaces, would that be the major AI firms like the Anthropic, OpenAI, paying on an all access fee for all the user, all the content? Or is there an area where the customer could be like individual, where they're just using one of the tool? Yes. So a little bit of more of the micropayments, I guess is a good way to put that.
Yeah. This is a great question, and it's incredibly timely, and we spend a lot of time thinking about this. I wouldn't say we have the answer 100%, and we will see how the market shapes out. And is it that OpenAI pays for access and then they provide a free service to their users that they monetize in some other way, or am I, as a ChatGPT user, paying for that content in some way? What I will say is, we forget, despite the massive headline fundraise numbers, how expensive these services are to run. Inference is expensive, memory is expensive, compute is expensive. And we're starting to see now OpenAI, Anthropic move from a model where they were effectively subsidizing users' compute costs and charging flat monthly fees and then just bearing whatever that compute variability might be, to moving to more usage-based billing structures, because they're looking to an IPO. These services, again, it's really expensive, right? And the more I search, the more I query, the more I use, the more I cost Anthropic. And so we're seeing this move towards usage-based billing from these providers, which indicates that perhaps more of that burden may actually fall onto the individual users. That doesn't necessarily mean I will go in and say, hey, I want to pay for the New York Times. Here's $5 for an article. But it might mean that because I'm using more compute and more content sources, Anthropic is charging me more for the usage of the service, and that's getting distributed under the hood. So we think that usage-based really is the future, kind of through the stack. How intermediated or disintermediated that is, don't necessarily know the answer today.
All right, thank you. Are there types of content or licenses that are more successful or you're seeing more success with in your marketplace? Like, what types of things are more successful? It kind of goes with one on the end too. What types of publishers' content is more conducive to being valuable to these areas?
Yeah, so right now the folks who are transacting in our marketplace are small to medium-sized developers, some in sort of general usage. Some of them are actually more enterprise cases where they're serving other developers. Others are providing services, consumer services in particular niches like HR or segments like this. Our marketplace is still really, really early. It's growing really fast, and we're successfully paying out a number of publishers now. We're not changing anyone's annual revenue targets just yet, but we're hoping to get there soon. And if we keep up on the growth rate, we will get there. I hesitate to say with certainty, oh, these are the types of publishers that are getting traction, because a lot of that has to do with the specific types of developers we might have, right? So if we have, a B2B HR developer on the platform, they're going to want a lot of business and HR related content. That doesn't mean that HR and business content is better for AI. It just means it's better for that specific AI developer and what they need. We're seeing success across a number of different categories on the supply side: general news, finance, business. But again, that doesn't mean those are the categories that are going to work. I think over time, the diversity of demand will lead to success across all sorts of different types of supply.
That's what I was gonna say as well, double down on, like, it's gonna be, like, almost everybody will be needed. It's like a for everyone kind of thing, because the more niche it gets, you are, as long as it, again, is the value and really good quality, there's areas and room for buyers of all these styles of content depending on where it goes. So it's about, like, being prepared for when that larger increase happens. This next topic is really great and very important that we understand. Bots are evolving, and it says we have no real understanding of the benefit risk of blocking them. I do believe that will evolve too. I do believe over time we will understand a little bit more about, like, what is going to happen when you block them. And I think the need of Google, the need that they're going to have, will continue to, like, prove out the value to publishers. However, at the moment we're not clear on the benefit and risk in blocking them. So then you have these information farms and you bought these bots, they take all your content. Say you're like mid-sized and say you're like fairly generic in offering, and that like of all of us are, right? You're never going to be the only source covering one topic of expertise in like what your publisher content is. So what do they do? It's a very like position where either damned if you do, damned if you don't. You like allow everything. So this comment says, I don't understand how monetizing that is possible when it's more or less lawless. I also hope to see the laws come along a little bit in the coming months. I mean, I hate this idea that there's like all the content I've spent lifetime saying to publishers to create is just being stolen and not monetized. So I do hate this. What do you think about this, Josh?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question, and it it is a little bit the Wild West at the moment. You know, to repeat again, I think some of what we need is, we do need better visibility, right? And some of that is basic visibility into the folks who are identifying themselves, but it is really challenging right now to identify the folks who are trying to hide the fact that they are a bot. That's an area where we think there can actually be really impactful legislation, is to just say it's illegal to pretend to be human on the internet. Would be a very simple framework that would allow publishers, data owners, content owners to get better control and better visibility on this stuff. But regulations and laws and court cases, they're going to help, but they're going to be a piece of the puzzle. Um, we think a lot about what happened in the music industry, and it's not a perfect comparison because it's a consumer direct service and it's a little bit different. Um, but it's a helpful mental model. And if you look at what happened, when Napster and LimeWire came about, there was all this fervor that, the music industry is dead. No one's going to pay for music ever again. Because why would I? Because it's all available for free in these lawless file sharing platforms. And that seemed to be true for a while, right? And folks were downloading music for free, and the music industry took a major hit. But what eventually happened, there was some regulation, and there was some piracy laws, and there were some folks who were prosecuted publicly for stealing music, and that had some impact. But if you look at what actually changed the trajectory of the music industry, it was the rise of iTunes and really eventually Spotify and streaming services. And as an individual user, I can still go get music for free on the internet if I want to. It's still available to me. But it's much easier for me to just pay the $14 a month and get every song in the world really well organized in a service on my phone that is already everywhere. And so what actually happened is Spotify is just a better service for the price than the pain and effort and risk of going out and pirating songs on the internet. And the reason we like this mental model is, again, it comes back to how do we create the Spotify-like experience? It doesn't mean it's a subscription. It just means how do we create the experience that is better and in theory worth paying for, so that the lawless version is not the version of choice.
Incredible analogy or comparison and that I had not really thought of was the music. That's really great. So I do think this too is where needs to be at scale. So what he just says of value. So you have your content things and coming up, there's not an immediate answer maybe for all of these pieces, but I know at least at Freestar, we're trying to find all the valuable pieces that make the most sense to package up that somebody would be interested to, that's big enough for it to care about. And then there's also some guardrails that I do believe will be a piece of it, either through that layer where you're able to block, or just seeing the data where you truly have to like see that some are worth allowing to see your content, and hopefully a monetization plan for that as well. It is still an absolute gray area on a path forward. I will agree on that one. All of this, if we haven't already dropped our email addresses publicly, we'll drop them here. But I'm loving the discussion around this. All right, so I'm gonna jump a few down related to, thank you so much. Related, like let's say when bot traffic spiked, it says then advertiser trust drops and still advertisers look down on bot traffic since they're not human traffic. So there's a whole nother service line for that. There's like all these different pieces of like areas that like are blocking the bot that are not human traffic. How to balance the issue if we are to cater to this new bot audience, minimizing the risk of lowering advertiser trust and revenue. What are, Josh, any sort of like the monetization aspect of this? I'm not sure that there isn't a good way already that some of this is blocked. Like some of the bot traffic may already be blocked from an advertiser perspective. But there's certainly going to be an impact long term just on that, the worth of that impression if it's a bot.
Yeah, I guess if the question is, the risk of bots, sort of rendering ads and inadvertently, serving ads to non-human audiences, that definitely does happen to some extent. Again, most of these bots don't render ads, but the more aggressive ones that are trying to pretend to be human often do. I'm not sure if you folks have played around with the browsers, Perplexity, Comet, and OpenAI's browser. These browsers, you might walk away from your computer and they are rendering ads across the experience. They're still relatively small in terms of adoption today, but that's a growing problem, right? And it's another reason why I think we need better control, better visibility, and a sort of sensible, hey, you don't have to say exactly what you're doing, maybe, but you have to identify that you're not a human, and that's a really important sort of step.
All right, everyone. Well, this has been so great. I'm sure we're going to weed through some of these questions. I think we hit the last one. I may have missed one in there, but you mentioned there's others. We talked about Cloudflare quite a bit and being able to understand there and getting the new audience. So we'll follow up and weed through some of these, but our email addresses are on screen. I think some of you may be interested in like the Tollbit demo and to be able to reach out and to see what it actually looks like. That was one of our first areas when we started our partnership, was just to be like, what do they see? What do you see as the publisher? What can you tell from this data to start making those decisions? What I don't think is going to happen is this is going to go away and nobody has to deal with it. I think everybody's going to have to find a plan. Freestar, we're doing our part, trying to help with partnerships such as this and ways to bring the deals in and just be aware of all the areas. But you are going to have to assume some responsibility and just that what's happening. And we appreciate all of your time today. Anything else last second you want to add, Josh?
No, I think we covered a lot. As you said, happy to answer any additional questions. My email's in the chat. Happy to set up a demo of the Tollbit platform for anyone who wants it. And yeah, just thank you all for attending. And Lindsay, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
So excited. This was such a great time. Josh, all right. Thank you all so much. And we will send this out shortly. Appreciate it. Talk soon. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.